The hall fell silent. The sound of shattered glass echoed louder than the music. Everyone froze. The waitress stood trembling, her hands cut, eyes wide. She had just knocked the two champagne glasses meant for the bride and groom's toast, sending them crashing to the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Betty blinked in confusion. Damian stood beside her, glass still half raised, his smile fading. "What's going on?" someone whispered. Then the head of the catering service rushed in, pale and frantic. He whispered something to the wedding planner, who turned white as chalk. Moments later, they both approached the couple's parents. "There's something you all need to see," the caterer said quietly. A large screen was rolled to the center of the hall. Guests murmured. The video played, grainy but clear enough. A woman in a waitress uniform sneaking into the banquet kitchen, pouring something into two glasses labeled bride and groom. The hall fell completely still. And then, the camera zoomed in on the woman's face. It was Eunice, Betty's twin sister. Whispers turned into panic. Chairs scraped. The bride covered her mouth in disbelief. And just then, the hall doors opened. Eunice walked in slowly, head high, eyes red but steady. "I hoped you drank it," she said, her voice cold. "I really did." Betty's legs wobbled. "Eunice, what did you do?" Eunice's lips trembled, but her eyes were burning. "You took him from me, Bet." "You did. All this while you pretended to help me, you were helping yourself." She laughed bitterly. "You wanted to be the perfect sister, right? The selfless one, always smiling, always caring. But look where that got us." Damian's voice was barely a whisper. "Eunice, what are you talking about?" She turned sharply. You're the cause of this. You played us both. You had her. But you wanted me too." The hall erupted in whispers and shock. And then, "I don't care what anyone thinks anymore," Eunice spat. "I just wish you both were dead." Betty's tears streamed uncontrollably as police sirens wailed outside. Before we dive into this story, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life, real, raw, and unforgettable. Because what you're about to hear isn't just another story about love. It's about betrayal, envy, and the thin line between family and revenge. If you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. Stay till the end, and you'll see how far jealousy can push even the ones we love the most. Now let's go back to where it all began. Months before that fateful day, nothing seemed out of place. Eunice and Betty were inseparable, identical twins with opposite souls. Betty was the gentle one, warm, soft-spoken, always seeing the good in people. Eunice was the fire, bold, outspoken, never afraid to say things as they were. They shared everything: a wardrobe, a car, even a small apartment in downtown Miami where they'd built a life far away from their parents' Manhattan home. To everyone who knew them, they were more like reflections than individuals. But reflections, when cracked, never mend the same way again. It started on a quiet Thursday evening. The sisters were in the kitchen, Betty stirring noodles while Eunice scrolled through her phone. "Eun," Betty said carefully, "you know that guy who came to fix our printer last week?" "Damian?" Eunice hummed without looking up. "Yeah, what about him?" Betty hesitated. "He's nice. Like really nice." Eunice glanced up, smirking. "Don't tell me you like him." Betty laughed nervously. "I just said he's nice." Eunice chuckled, shaking her head. "Bet you fall too easily. That guy doesn't even look your type." But her tone was off, half playful, half sharp. Betty ignored it and changed the topic. But something about the way Eunice said it lingered. A week later, Damian texted Betty. He'd gotten her number from a mutual friend, asking if she could help him reach Eunice. "I've been trying to ask her out, but she keeps dodging me," he wrote. "Maybe you can put in a good word for me." Betty smiled faintly. She knew Eunice, proud, cautious, never one to trust easily. "I'll talk to her," she replied. When she told Eunice later that night, Eunice's reaction was unexpected. "He's talking to you about me?" she asked, frowning. "Well, yeah," Betty said softly. "He likes you." "He said he's serious." Eunice shrugged, pretending not to care. Then he should be serious enough to move on." "I'm not interested," Betty blinked. "You're not?" I don't do men who flirt around. He gives that vibe, but he seems genuine, Betty insisted. Maybe just give him a chance? Eunice rolled her eyes. You sound like you like him yourself. Betty froze. What? No, I'm just saying. Forget it, Eunice said, cutting her off. I'm not interested. That night, while Eunice was asleep, Betty found herself scrolling through Damian's Instagram, photos of him hiking, smiling, reading at cafes. He really did seem kind. She sighed and locked her phone. He's just my friend, nothing more. But feelings don't always follow rules. Over the next few weeks, Damian and Betty talked more, mostly about Eunice, but gradually about everything else too. Work, books, favorite movies, weekend plans. Betty didn't realize how much she was smiling until Kemi, her colleague, teased her one morning. Who's Damian? You've been grinning at your phone for hours, Betty flushed. He's just a friend. Uh-huh. That's what they all say before it gets serious. One Saturday afternoon, Damian and Betty ran into Eunice at a cafe. Eunice's smile faltered when she saw them. Oh, you two are here together. Yeah, Damian said easily. Bet invited me for coffee. Did she now? Betty stammered. It wasn't like that, Eun. We were just… Eunice cut her off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Relax, sis. I don't care, but she did. That night, she didn't speak much. She barely looked at Betty. When Betty tried to lighten the mood, Eunice said quietly, You know, sometimes I think you enjoy being the one everyone likes. You can't help it. Betty blinked. What do you mean? Forget it, she said, walking away. But the crack had formed. Days turned into weeks. Eunice started keeping to herself more, coming home late, ignoring Betty's texts. Then, one evening, Damian called. His tone was nervous. Bet, I've been meaning to ask you something. Yeah? I know this sounds sudden, but would you be my girlfriend? Betty froze. What? Damian, I know what you're thinking. But I've tried with Eunice, and it's clear she doesn't feel the same. You're different. You see me. Her heart raced. I can't say yes without talking to her first. He smiled. That's what I love about you. You care about people. That night, Betty told Eunice everything. Eunice stared blankly. He asked you out? Yes, but only after you made it clear you weren't interested. I just wanted you to know before I say anything. Eunice's silence stretched. Then she smiled faintly. You have my blessing, Bet. I don't like him anyway. Betty's shoulders relaxed. You're sure? Of course. You deserve to be happy. But when Betty walked away that night, Eunice's smile vanished. Her hands clenched into fists. You deserve to be happy. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, and that was the beginning of the end. Before Damian, they were sisters. After him, they were strangers living under the same roof. Polite, distant, and slowly drifting apart. Eunice told herself she didn't care. But every time she saw them laughing, every time Betty's phone lit up with his name, her chest tightened. It wasn't love anymore. It was pride. And pride, when bruised, turns into something darker. For a while, everything seemed fine. At least, that's what Betty told herself. She and Damian were officially dating. Eunice congratulated her, even helped her pick an outfit for their first dinner date. On the surface, things looked normal. 2 sisters, 1 love story, and a bond strong enough to survive anything. But beneath that calm, something was rotting. Eunice started changing in small, almost invisible ways. She laughed less, smiled less, and when she did smile, it felt forced, a thin, practiced curve that never reached her eyes. Whenever Damian called and Betty's face lit up, Eunice would quietly slip out of the room. Sometimes she'd turn up the volume on her headphones, pretending not to hear. At first, Betty thought she was just adjusting. She gave her sister space. But silence has a way of growing louder when it comes from someone you love. One evening, as Betty stood in front of the mirror, trying on a dress Damian had bought her, Eunice walked in. Wow, Eunice said flatly. You look expensive. Betty laughed softly. It's just a dinner dress. Damian insisted. Eunice tilted her head. He insists a lot these days, doesn't he? Betty frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Eunice shrugged, walking toward the window. Nothing, just thinking out loud. But when she turned away, Betty caught the reflection of her eyes in the glass, cold, hurt, and distant. The arguments began subtly: who forgot to wash the dishes, who left the light on, why Betty spent too much time at Damian's. Each quarrel was small, but each left a scar. One night Eunice snapped, "You're barely home anymore. It's like I lost my sister the moment you found him." Betty froze. "Eun, that's not fair." "It's true. You think I don't see it? You and Damian, your little perfect love story, you got what you wanted." "I didn't steal him from you," Betty cried. "You told me you didn't care." Eunice's voice broke. "And you believed me?" The room fell silent. Betty's heart sank as Eunice's tears welled up, not just from jealousy, but from years of unspoken competition, pride, and love. Their parents flew down from Manhattan when things got worse. At breakfast, their father sighed heavily. "We didn't raise you girls to fight over a man." Eunice folded her arms. "Then maybe you shouldn't have raised us to be so identical." "Eunice," their mother said gently, "your sister loves you. You're both hurting, but this, Eunice interrupted, "this is her fault." Betty's lips trembled. "I don't even know what I did anymore." Her father looked between them, two reflections of each other, broken by something as fragile as affection. After that visit, the silence in the apartment grew unbearable, so Betty packed her things. She moved in with Damian. It wasn't a grand decision, more of a quiet surrender. She just wanted peace. Damian welcomed her with open arms. At first, everything felt warm again. The laughter, the cooking together, the shared mornings. But even in her happiest moments, she couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. Because every time she picked up her phone, she'd stare at her sister's contact, Eunice, and hesitate to call. When she finally did one night, Eunice didn't pick up. Meanwhile, Eunice was falling apart. The silence in the apartment became her only companion. The scent of Betty's old perfume lingered, haunting every corner. She kept scrolling through their old photos, birthdays, trips, late-night selfies, until she couldn't take it anymore. In one of the pictures, Damian's arm was around Betty, but his eyes, they were on her. She zoomed in, trembling. It wasn't much, just a look. But that's all she needed. Her thoughts twisted. He wanted me first. If she hadn't interfered, things would be different. Jealousy became poison. Poison became obsession. She began tracking them, checking Betty's social media, watching Damian's stories, saving pictures. Every smiling photo felt like a taunt. 6 months later, Betty and Damian announced their wedding. Eunice stared at the message for a long time. The invitation card attached, the gold trimming, the soft words. Together forever, Damian and Betty. She felt the room spin. Her sister was marrying him, the man who once begged her for a chance, the man she pushed away but never truly let go of. Her nails dug into her palm until blood surfaced. That night she didn't sleep. She replayed every memory in her head, Damian's voice, Betty's laughter, her own mistakes. She took everything from me. By morning, she'd made up her mind. She booked a hotel room across the street from the wedding venue, quietly, anonymously. Then she called someone. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I'll need a catering uniform," she said, "and access to the banquet hall." There's a kind of silence that doesn't ask to be broken. It's the kind that hums beneath celebration, quiet, cold, and waiting. That was the silence hovering around Eunice the morning of her sister's wedding. The day everyone else had been counting down to, she had been counting up. Every reason, every wound, every silent resentment that brought her here. 6 months had passed since Betty moved out of the apartment they once shared. 6 months since laughter turned to quiet avoidance. 6 months since sisters stopped being sisters. And in that time, the world had crowned Betty the lucky one. Her engagement photos were everywhere. Instagram, family chats, the newspapers her mother kept. Betty and Damian, smiling in their perfect white, like sinless angels framed in light. And in every one of those pictures, Eunice saw herself, erased. She'd booked her hotel 2 days before the wedding. A small, quiet room across from the hall. Nothing fancy, just close enough to hear the music. To everyone else, she was invisible now, but invisibility has its advantages. She watched them arrive that morning from her window. The cars, the guests, the flashes of cameras. her parents stepping out in their best clothes, smiling proudly. Betty in her wedding gown, graceful, radiant, flawless. It would have been beautiful if it didn't hurt so much. That night before the wedding, Eunice barely slept. She stared at the ceiling, replaying memories that refused to fade. Damian at their family picnic, smiling at her sister's jokes. Betty holding his hand when she thought no one noticed. The subtle way Damian's eyes had shifted over time, from curiosity to comfort, from interest to love, but never toward her again. Love had moved on, quietly, like it didn't owe her an explanation. By the time the sun rose, Eunice had made peace with the one truth that had haunted her. No one was coming to fix what had been broken. Not Betty, not Damian, not even time. And if no one was coming to fix it, she would end it. The catering staff arrived early at the banquet hall that afternoon. Busy hands carried trays, polished glasses, folded napkins into swans. Among them, in a black apron and low cap, was Eunice. She blended in seamlessly. No one looked twice. Pain has a way of teaching you invisibility. She walked calmly, quietly, keeping to herself. Her focus fixed on the small black bag she carried, and what rested inside it. The banquet hall was breathtaking. Gold chandeliers dripped light like honey. A live band rehearsed a slow instrumental tune. The tables glowed with ivory cloth and crystal glasses. Everywhere she looked, people smiled. People toasted. People celebrated love. It was almost cruel, how the world kept moving, even when your heart had stopped. As the evening unfolded, the bride and groom arrived. Cheers erupted. Phones flashed. "Here comes the couple of the year," the MC announced. Eunice watched from behind a serving tray. Betty's smile was gentle. Damian's arm was steady around her waist. Their chemistry filled the room effortlessly, the kind that looks like destiny to everyone else, but betrayal to the one who was left behind. Time slowed when the toast was announced. The MC's voice boomed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, raise your glasses for the bride and groom, Damian and Betty." The crowd cheered. Waiters and waitresses moved in synchrony, refilling glasses and aligning trays. At the couple's table, two special glasses stood apart, each one with a gold tag reading bride and groom. The hall fell silent. The sound of shattered glass echoed louder than the music. Everyone froze. The waitress stood trembling, her hands cut, eyes wide. She had just knocked the two champagne glasses meant for the bride and groom's toast, sending them crashing to the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Betty blinked in confusion. Damian stood beside her, glass still half raised, his smile fading. "What's going on?" someone whispered. The music died when the glass hit marble. A clean, cruel sound that cut straight through the chandelier light and silenced 1,000 eyes at once. The waitress, hands nicked from the shards, chest rising and falling like she'd run a mile, didn't flinch. She set the empty tray down, looked at the couple, and said in a steady voice that carried to the back table, "Do not drink." You could hear the bandleader's breath catch, then motion, rushed whispers, the head caterer sliding toward the planner, two men in tuxedos stepping from shadows near the doors. 30 seconds later, the ballroom lights dipped and the giant LED screen bloomed to life above the stage. Grainy footage, kitchen corridor. Fluorescent glare. A woman in a catering cap and low bun uncaps a small vial, tips it over two gold-tagged flutes. Bride and groom, and swirls the stems with practiced care. The camera pushed tighter. It was Eunice, Betty's twin. Same jawline, same eyes, only these were ringed with sleeplessness and something darker. A sound moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. No one breathed. 1,000 phones hovered and forgot to record. The doors at the back opened. Eunice walked in like a verdict, chin high, eyes red but unblinking. "I hoped you drank it," she said. "I really did." Betty's fingers left pale crescents in her own palms. Damian's arm went instinctively across her shoulder, then fell, careful, as if any sudden touch might break the air itself. Before the first scream could find a throat, the waitress peeled back her lapel. A matte black button glinted. "Miami PD," she said, voice clean, official, almost bored. "Undercover. Body cams live." Kitchen CCTV is mirrored to house AV. Those two flutes were tampered. Two tuxedoed men rolled badges over the heads of stunned guests. The bandleader let his baton drop. The MC stepped backward off the stage, hands up like applause had become a crime. Damian didn't look away from Eunice. When he finally spoke, it was the calm of a man choosing every word like an oath. "Why?" she laughed, small, sharp. "You tried me first. Remember, over and over. Then you ran to her and she opened the door. You both got what you wanted. I wanted you to choke on it." Damian nodded once, as if he'd expected the sentence and still hated its taste. "I did come to you first," he said, not raising his voice, forcing the whole hall to lean in. "7 times, Eunice. I asked you out privately. I asked through your friends. I asked through your sister because I thought maybe you didn't take me seriously. You blocked me. You mocked me. You told Betty to tell me no on your behalf." His eyes went to Betty, then back to the twin who shared her face, and none of her softness. "And in the middle of that," he said, "I fell in love with her. Not behind your back, after you refused me, clearly and repeatedly. That's not theft, that's timing. So what exactly are you jealous of? My choice, or the fact that your pride said no and life moved without you?" Eunice's mouth trembled. Pride flickered. Rage tried to stand up inside her and then sat down again. The undercover detective lifted a narrow strip from a foil pouch, knelt by the broken puddle, and held the paper near the liquid. It flared a faint, ugly color. "Preliminary shows a cyanogenic compound," she said without drama. "Same signature we've been tracking in 2 other banquet incidents. This quarter, same boutique pathway, same carrier oil. We've been running a sting across high-risk venues for 3 weeks. Tonight we got the poor, full chain of custody." The screen split, left side the detective's button cam, wide, slightly fisheye, catching Eunice's approach to the special flutes. Right side the kitchen dome camera, time-stamped, showing the uncapped vial, the angle of the wrist, the swirl. The ballroom's sound became the room's own heartbeat. Security sealed the side exits. The tuxedoed men, no longer guests, never guests, closed in gently. The detective faced Eunice. "Eunice," Betty started, voice breaking, "please, you told me you didn't care. You said—" "I lied," Eunice said, and finally the anger sounded like grief. "I lied because I wasn't going to beg a man who chose you. I lied because every look you get, I was told I also had, and somehow it was never mine. You always get picked for the life I'm still auditioning for." The detective didn't let the room drown in the confession. "Mrs. Eunice, you're under arrest for attempted murder and possession of a controlled toxic substance," she said, steady as law. "You have the right to remain silent." Cuffs, no struggle, just a long exhale like she'd been holding it since the afternoon the save-the-date hit her phone. They walked her past ruined petals and neat men who didn't know where to put their eyes. Outside, a siren painted the night blue-white blue. The detective watched the doors close, then turned to the couple. "We didn't expect the source to be family," she said, "but the lab match on the compound should close all 3 cases. As of now, the ballroom's safe. I'd suggest you sit. Shock is a slow thief." Damian nodded. Betty's body found the empty chair like gravity had remembered her name. No vows that night, no applause. Just truth on a giant screen and a building full of people learning how silence sounds. Damian and Betty met quietly with detectives and the DA's intake team. They gave clean statements. Then they made the call that surprised everyone. They declined to press any additional victim impact demands and asked to be notified only when the case moved. They chose life over headlines. "Let's leave," Damian said. "No speeches, just a plane." They flew out, 2 bags each, phones dark. Lisbon first, where nobody knew their names. Then Marrakesh, where they walked markets at dusk and let other people's noise drown their own. Finally Accra, where they sat by the water and said the hard parts out loud. Guilt, anger, shock, the truth about boundaries with family, and the truth about love after trauma. They didn't post, they didn't pose. They healed like ordinary people, sleep, food, sun, silence, and a rule. No decisions until both of us can breathe without counting. Florida doesn't need your permission to prosecute attempted murder. The lab matched the compound's chemical print to the two earlier banquet poisonings. The supplier route lined up. The evidence chain was clean. The prosecutor filed counts. The defense asked for leniency. The judge read the report, looked at two sisters with the same eyes, and chose both justice and restraint. Sentence: 3 years in state plus 1 year supervised parole with mandatory therapy, employment planning, and no contact orders except by structured consent. The judge said one line the news kept replaying: jealousy is a feeling. Poison is a choice. Betty and Damian didn't fight the state. They also didn't fuel it. They wrote a brief statement: "We're focusing on healing. We ask for privacy." The prison smelled like disinfectant and something older. Betty's hands shook at check-in. Damian squeezed once, no fixer words, just presence. The glass was thicker than they expected. The phones were scratched and sticky, with 1,000 other apologies. Eunice sat down first, thinner, no makeup, eyes that had stopped trying to perform. She picked up the receiver. Didn't speak. Betty lifted hers. "Hi." Silence stretched, then Eunice broke. Not a dramatic sob, just a leak that finally found a crack. "I envied you," she said. "Since school. Since teachers said our names and meant yours. Since boys looked at both of us and chose you with their eyes before their mouths caught up. I told myself I didn't care. Then I learned pride is just jealousy in heels. When Damian came, I thought, finally mine. And when he wasn't, I called it theft so I wouldn't have to admit I'd said no, because saying yes felt like losing to you in a new way." She swallowed. "I could have stopped this 100 times. I didn't." "That's on me," Betty cried, not just for the night of glass, but for the 1,000 tiny cuts both of them had ignored because twins are taught to share everything, including hurt. "I'm sorry for falling in love with him," Betty said. "Not because love is wrong, but because I didn't look back long enough to see what choosing him did to you after you said no. I should have checked on my sister better." Damian leaned closer to the glass, picked up the second phone. "I tried the right way with you," he said simply. "You said no. I moved on. I won't apologize for loving your sister. But I am sorry we all let silence grow teeth." Eunice nodded. "I don't want your marriage. I want my life back from the thing that keeps telling me you took it." She looked at Betty straight. "If you can, come again. Not to relive the night, to practice being sisters without pretending one of us isn't bleeding." Betty wiped her face. "We'll come." The guard tapped the glass. 2 minutes. They said nothing else. Sometimes the last mercy is not trying to fix what the clock won't allow. 3 weeks later, they didn't throw a do-over wedding. They went to the courthouse at noon on a Tuesday and signed in front of a clerk who mispronounced a middle name and asked if anyone wanted a photo. They didn't. The ring didn't need witnesses to be true. And they became one at last. Tell us where you are watching from: Lagos, Nairobi, Accra, London, Toronto, New York. In the comments, answer this. Was dropping their own complaint strength or softness? And if you were Betty, would you keep visiting or draw a hard line?